right, everybody. Welcome to a Friday afternoon edition of the Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm David Rabinovitz.
Yes, he is. And David is with us as well. And we're so happy to be joined by a gentleman that I got to talk to briefly about a week ago. And I was so intrigued with his multi-talents. I said, you would be a great interview for the top of our Green Rush International show. His name is Brian Sekandi. Is it Sekandi, Brian?
Brian Sekandi, you got it.
Sekandi like candy cane. I get it. Okay. Brian, tell us a little bit about your story, Brian, because I found it so intriguing. I'd like to, again, enlighten our audience a little bit about how you became to be where you are and in the business that you are in. And then we'll get into the book that you wrote, which I think is awesome.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that intro. So my journey, I guess, to where I'm at today, I've spent the last 17 years in executive recruitment. So helping large global brands, hire and staff individuals across sales, marketing, supply chains, and operations. 2018, as cannabis was becoming federally legalized or regulated here in the Canadian marketplace, I started Careers Cannabis with a really simple mission. How can we help get more access to cannabis opportunities for more people, especially more diverse people from different backgrounds? As we started that mission, we recognized that we needed to organize the cannabis industry, all of this raw data, this job data, and create a cannabis taxonomy, which we did. It's about 192 subcategories in that taxonomy and 14 primary categories. So if you've read the book, Jimmy, in the back of the book, the glossary, those 14 categories are essentially our primary structure of our cannabis taxonomy. So that's our journey. My personal journey, I'm originally from Uganda. I was born in Uganda, grew up in Zimbabwe, immigrated to Canada when I was fairly young, grew up in London, Ontario. I first encountered cannabis myself when I was 13 years old at the Royal Army Canadian Cadets. And that was kind of my first kind of exploration into cannabis. At this time, it was wild hemp growing on the Army base, and which we discovered, but that was really kind of the start of the journey of what I would say 20 plus years of cannabis culture experience.
There you go. And that's a great story. And the reason why I wanted Brian to tell his story is because on our Green Rush program now, we are asking people that might be watching this, listening to it, to go onto our website at procannabismedia.com and tell your cannabis story. Come out of the cannabis closet and tell your story. And we've had quite a few entries into this because we are going to pick 5 finalists and then give one lucky winner a your story unit. And of course, because I'm remote, I'm not in my studio, I usually have it on display, but it is a child-proof and smell-proof container for the cannabis connoisseur. It really is a very nice thing. And yourstory.com, story with an I.com, is where you can find out all about that. And as by coincidence, it happens to be a Canadian company. Now, I will say this, on past shows, I've actually read a few of these stories, and we've had some amazing stories sent to us. Wow. So that bar to win that storage device is very high right now. And I will say the person who actually entered a video is probably going to be one of the first people to get a t-shirt. I promised whoever entered the contest via video, I would send a t-shirt to her, and I will be sending one to her without giving away her name. But we've had some incredible stories. And Brian, through your journey, David, you work in the cannabis space as well, talking to a lot of entrepreneurs in the social equity space. The various stories that people have about this plant. And let me tell you, when I say various, changed my life, saved my life. I got busted for this. I needed this after my operation. Whatever it is, it's
couldn't get off opioids, right?
Right.
And I had those stories. I got to travel a lot. As I was growing up, and especially 16 plus. I studied in England. I traveled, lived in China, lived in Africa, and so cannabis has always been a place where I could find community, safe space. I could congregate and meet like-minded folks around the world, and especially in environments where, it was definitely a lot more restrictive. So, cannabis for me has always been that side of sidekick, if you would, especially in terms of, traveling and meeting new people around the world.
Did you ever have any issues with law enforcement along the way? I had to ask.
So, no, I've been fortunate that I've never had any major issues in terms of law enforcement. Again, I was very lucky in being able to find safe spaces. And that's what one of the things that is missing in today's cannabis culture is that community. In the legacy cannabis environment, there was a sense of community, and you needed community in order to be safe. There's a lot of pioneers, predating legalization, that built these communities where people would come, artists, entertainers, creators, and they would congregate, they would create, whether it's music or art, expressions, and a lot of that artistic expression really came from, either being inspired by cannabis or being in an environment where cannabis was freely able to be consumed. And so in a lot of my travels, it was really important that I found, like-minded individuals, and very much places that I could find that would safe, especially as a young Black man.
Well, that is cool. And what's funny is I really believe that this plant is designed and was put on this earth to bring people together. And especially during the era, Brian, when it was, you had to sneak around the block and do it, or down the alleyway, or right. And then you'd find someone would smell it and they'd find you, and it'd be a total stranger. And they'd be like, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, good. Get out. Oh yeah, here you go." It was a great way to socialize with people. And I discovered that in the early 70s, let's just say. You mentioned 13, mine was 14 in 1971. It happens to coincide with the beginning of the Waldos and the 420 movement and all that. And we'll explain that in a little while. But I think now is a great time to talk a little bit about the book that you wrote.
Sure.
And the name of the book is called Kids of Cannabis. My Mom and Dad Work in Cannabis. And look, There it is being held up, but we're going to do one better for you. I believe we're going to actually superimpose it over to your shoulder, because we have the magical way to do that. And anyway, that being said, why did you write this book is the first thing.
Great. So, since our mission was to expand access to cannabis jobs, we spent 2 years talking to individuals in the industry and those looking to get in the industry. And stigma was still a huge hurdle. In stigma, there's many different facets to stigma. And, and one of the stigmas that we identified that was, nobody was really addressing, or there was no tools to address, was the family stigma. I personally have dealt with that stigma within a family. I know it's not helpful. It can be really traumatic in terms of kind of, your self-identity. And so we really wanted to address a type of stigma that, that could only be addressed, in our opinion, by doing something creative, lighthearted, but really, confronting people's stigma and that idea of, are you going to have a conversation with your kids about cannabis? And if you do, how are you going to approach that conversation? So we knew that was a big issue, and that's one of the kind of the big inspirations of us kind of, writing the book, talking about, parents that work in the industry and how those parents would have that conversation with their kids, but also with their parents as well.
Right. And it's not easy. David, I know for a fact that you too have an interesting story about that as well. And it's never easy. And I'll be perfectly honest with everybody, as I always am on this show, sometimes painfully honest. I'm not quite sure if my parents were alive that I'd still be doing a talk show about cannabis, because I know it would have bothered them. But I also know that my dad was smart enough to know that I was partaking, let's just say. Okay. David, what kind of interesting conversations have you had in your family about
in my
cannabis?
family? Well, my family, that's a curveball question.
Yes, it is.
So
I knew exactly what I was doing.
Yes, you did. So I'll tell you the most interesting story.
Okay.
Most interesting story is I was at my alma mater, Babson College, and I was going to judge a business plan competition. One of my classmates had created a product for kids who are on the autism spectrum for the classroom. So because he happened to be competing, I was not going to judge the MBA business part of it. I would judge the undergrad. And one of the people who was leading on the judges was one of the professors there. So we start out, everybody goes around the room and introduces themselves. And I start out and I say, what I do would put you to sleep. I'm a consultant to engineering firms in matters of ownership transition, financial issues, M&A support. There you go, Jimmy. That's exactly it. And I said, and on the other end of the barbell, I do consulting in the cannabis sector. Invariably, people light up about that. I remember probably about 6 or 7 years ago being with a team of engineers in Ohio, and we're working on strategic planning. And I happen to mention that I do some stuff in the cannabis sector. Break time comes, and 3 or 4 people come up to me. I said, okay, they're going to start to ask me about how do you become a shareholder in a firm and all that. Brian, not one question about it. Everybody wants to talk to me about cannabis, about marijuana, right?
Yeah.
So we finish up the competition, and the professor reaches out to me, wants to meet with me to talk about marijuana. Well, she's now my fiance, so let me jump to that point. That's why it's an important story in my life.
That is a good story. I really like it.
But there's an important social justice component of this, which is her interest in marijuana wasn't because she was a pothead. It was her son, who was I consider him my stepson now, though he keeps reminding me, you haven't yet married my mother. But
that sounds like Ben.
It is Ben, and Jimmy knows Ben well because in Jimmy's prior business, he trained Ben in the broadcasting area.
Hey, Brian, I got Ben an interview with Bobby Orr, so I'm guessing I'm in his book of life because he was a hockey player. Okay.
Yeah, Ben is you can hear the screams with the playoffs going on. Right. I mean, it's why even doesn't matter what Beth does to put stuff in her ears and over her eyes. Somebody scores or somebody does something stupid, Ben's screaming through the house. Anyway. So Ben's a hockey player. He's playing up in Wisconsin. And for his birthday, his mother sends him, and they're both into Breaking Bad. So his mother sends him some candy she got on Etsy that looks like whatever it is the guy in Breaking Bad cooked up in his lab, that blue crystal meth or whatever. Yeah. It's candy, right? Okay. Yeah. It's candy. But it's got the label on it of the label from the Breaking Bad, the Pollo, whatever it is, right? So if you don't watch Breaking Bad, folks, or you didn't, I'm sorry, because this won't make a lot of sense. Somehow there is an issue. The police show up, they find the candy in the room, and they accuse him of having meth. Wow. And he's saying, are you out of your mind? Now he's a freshman. Are you out of your mind? It's candy. My mother sent it to me. They say, no, we had it lab tested, right? Because they're allowed, and they're putting the pressure on him. Yeah. And somehow, as they're putting the pressure on him, they get him to admit that he shared a joint with somebody. Now they arrest him and his roommate, and they're charging, and they're going after him for like distribution because they shared a joint, right? That's how ridiculous it is. Now, crazy. Now, and this may not be politically correct the way I'm going to describe it, but I tend to be a very straight shooter. So Ben is a middle-class white kid from an educated family with a very, very intelligent mother. His roommate, I believe I didn't know him, and I didn't know Beth at the time, but I think he was, let's say, Latinx, and his parents were immigrants. So they didn't have a clue what to do with the kid being in trouble. So Beth kind of jumped in, called the other parents and steered it. They withdrew the kids from school. The whole thing just blew up. And the school's attitude was not very helpful. Ben burned all of his hockey gear that said Wisconsin on it, or laid it out and let the dogs defecate all over it. But that's what really got us to get into the social equity scene, because of when she saw up front what can happen and the way people can get railroaded. And if she hadn't had the resources and the intelligence, right, and the experience to know what to do and call an attorney, those 2 kids' lives, their college lives would have been trashed. And the other kid, if Beth hadn't said to the parents, pull him out of school, and fought for the other kid as well, he would have been just litter on the roadside here with this stuff. So that really drove a lot of our direction. That's how we became, that's why we pursued the social equity training program with the Mass Cannabis Control Commission. And that's why I do as much mentoring as I can with people who are trying to get into the business.
That's really good.
That's my story.
That's a story. And by the way, that's the first time I've actually heard all the details to that story. I knew the high end, if you will, the highlights, the Cliff Notes. Back to Cliff Notes and back to your book. I want to know who illustrated it for you too. Tell us a little bit about that person.
So the illustrator, she's out of Europe. She's currently in a country that doesn't allow cannabis usage, and so she's asked me not to use her last name, but a great artist out of Eastern Europe, and I found her online, and she was interested in the subject matter, which again, there's a lot of stigma around cannabis, and when approaching somebody and saying, and I couldn't share the book details at the time, but I need you to illustrate this children's book around cannabis. It took some time finding the right artist and finding an artist that could give this justice. So I'm really fortunate that we found her and that she was really open to the subject matter, and really helping to create and design the three characters, Jack, Charlotte, and Bruce.
And it's so interesting to me, and you and I had this talk when I am one who believes that parents have a great opportunity now to get themselves educated about cannabis and then incorporate that into the talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which every parent has to have with their child at some point.
Yeah.
So I think that in a lot of ways, this book could serve as a guide for some of those things because of how you spun each issue. Was that the point?
Yeah, well, it's the idea of, and I think about being a kid myself, like I didn't have those tough conversations with my parents early on. You typically have them, when it's too late or you're at that point where, your parents are being forced to have that conversation. And so, cannabis is part of that, I think, arsenal or toolkit of tough conversations that parents will eventually need to have with their kids. And, as I said to you, when we first connected, and I'm saying to a lot of folks is, if you don't have this conversation with your kids, somebody else will. And right now, most of our kids are being educated through social media and entertainment or entertainers. And that is great to a point, but we need to also, bring back science into the conversation, bring back history, bring back reality. So what does this mean to their day-to-day lives? I don't think it's, in today's world, if you're a parent, it's probably not wise to believe that your teenage or your kids 10 plus don't have access to this information online or through their friends or through their peer groups. And so I think it's important that parents interrupt as they start to get some of this information and supply an alternative view that is not just do not use drugs or do not have sex or do not whatever, but it's more nuanced, and it does take into consideration that we live in a world where just saying do not do is not enough. Kids want answers. I know when I was younger, I wanted answers. And if I didn't get the answer, then I was looking to somebody else to give me. And unfortunately, when I think back at being a young child and 13 years old and trying to find out more about cannabis, just based on that curiosity of finding wild hemp on an army base, the folks that ended up teaching me about cannabis didn't have my best interest at heart. They're the type of folks that were preying on this, naive mind that was curious but had no direction. And so I think there's a great opportunity to stop that in its tracks and prevent people that will prey on kids, people that will prey on ignorance, prevent those folks from even being able to get a grasp, on the youth of today.
Absolutely. And I hope, Brian, that we may actually have a chance to get involved and start talking to parent groups, parent-teacher groups, because the time to talk to your children is probably when they're between, would you say, I like that 11 to 14 with 12 being the sweet spot. Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends. So, the book, when we went through Amazon, they vetted the book and we said, it's 9 to 17-year-olds based on the language, the subject matter. And, that's a right age where, kids, are very interested in wondering what their parents do for a living and can truly understand it. But there've been mothers and fathers that have purchased the book and their 6-year-olds are fully engaged in the book. There's one 6-year-old who noticed that, we didn't have a particular item in our book, a particular sector. And she was looking for where her mother worked and she was, Mom, where is packaging, right? And so mother emailed me back and I told the mother, I said, let the 6-year-old know we're gonna add packaging into our glossary under manufacturing, which it sits, but we didn't explicitly say it in our first edition book. So, that's an example of a 6-year-old who knows what mom does for a living, was going through this book with their mother and immediately was like, where's mom's job, right? And so, I think the age group is probably a bit wider. Ultimately, it's a guide for parents. So we're hoping that parents will take this and they'll be able to get a better understanding of who it's a good fit for. I'll tell you one last story. There's a father, cannabis entrepreneur, and he was sharing it with his son. His son is 3-4 years old, and too young to truly understand the subject matter, but he loved the characters. And so he was going through the book, and the little boy Neil is like, where's Charlotte? Where's Charlotte? And so it really is, I think, a book that could be shared with the whole family at all ages, really. But ideally, that's the guidance is really going to be the parents.
And I will admit, I read it cover to cover.
Nice.
Okay. Today, 37 pages.
Did you understand all the words?
Yes, I did.
We had a glossary at the
Thank
back.
God for that glossary, right? Thank God for that glossary. So Brian, it's 4:20, and as you know, 4:20 is a magical time in the cannabis space. It's usually when we take our break and we explain how it all started with the Waldos in San Rafael, California, and then the Grateful Dead got involved. This is also going to allow me to plug an interview that I did, I think it was yesterday. Every day is long these days, with Trixie Garcia, who is the daughter of Jerry Garcia, the longtime great guitar player for the Grateful Dead. And it was a great interview. We're going to release it next week. It's you'll see a little piece of it in the We Talk News program that follows this live show. We are talking about the international market of cannabis. And because we actually only have 2 guests in the next half hour planned, if you want to stay until 5 o'clock and join Nathan and Chris, and we'll explain who they are after the break, you are more than welcome to do that.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
All right. So in the meantime, it is 4:20. It's time. This is the time when we play Shanty by Jonathan Edwards, which is my version of 420. It was the song that we identified with when we were children, a folk rocker from New Hampshire. And this is his rendition of Shanty from a public radio studio. And David's putting on his jester hat. He doesn't understand chroma key and how it works because it's blue and green. It's going to blend into the background. But we'll explain that to him after this break. We'll be back.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, it's a whole new world of weed. But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
And we're back, folks.
Yes, go ahead, David. Come on.
Go ahead. Okay.
Reset
And
the
we're
show.
back.
Go ahead.
We've managed to persuade Brian to stay with us for the 5 o'clock segment. We're welcoming 2 great guests. We've got Nathan and we've got Chris. Chris has been with us in the past, and we're going to have another great conversation. Take it away, Jimmy.
Oh, that's good. I'll let you get away with it. All right. Fair enough. Nathan Mison, first of all, thank you for joining us. Your reputation precedes you, and the way we got connected was through Afshin Musavian. And it's so interesting because now we're doing this Tell Your Story promotion. We're encouraging people to go on our website and share their stories so they can win that really cool container that they're putting out there. But tell us your story, Nathan, because this is really interesting to me, and I think our audience will be interested to hear your background and how you got into this cannabis world.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. It always scares me when somebody says my reputation precedes me. So that's always a good framing going into the conversation. No, I've been very lucky to been in the cannabis sector for 5.5, 6 years now. You know, we were just talking about the incredible book that Brian has. One of the reasons that I'm actually in the cannabis sector is for my kids. There's not very many opportunities that you have to build a new regulatory regime that you'll get to tell your kids about that potentially they could work in. And, you know, that you had a help in shaping what that industry is. And I wanted to take that on responsibility for my 13, 11, and 5-year-old who grew up with dad running around the country. So I was lucky enough to become one of the founders of Fire and Flower as one of the first employees in Western Canada. The company grew from there, had an incredible opportunity to see the company grow, and had my fingers in many of the things at the beginning, from our first applications to opening up our second provinces. I think I've done 5 lotteries across the country. And then saw that company grow from ethereal to now I think that's the second largest cannabis retailer in Canada, which, by the way, we need to stop giving Canada a little bit more props, and it should be in the world, which is a really kind of cool thing to say, because they have 85 stores plus, which is a really interesting thing that we should talk about more. But that journey ended, and I was lucky enough to start DIPLOMAT Consulting, which is focused on helping cannabis as we know now, but more specifically where it's going, on how you can create new opportunities and change the conversation and open new regulatory possibilities of where it's going, because we're a millimeter on top of 20% of an iceberg that's 80% below the water. So what we know isn't anything more than what's more to come. So that conversation is really, really exciting, like cannabis tourism and hospitality, wellness, all of that stuff. So really excited to be here with great people like Chris and Brian to have a great conversation. And of course, yourself, sir.
Thanks, appreciate that. And of course, that's a great segue into Chris Day. Chris, tell us a little bit about what you're up to now and how much your organization has grown.
Well, since we last talked, it's continued to grow pretty well. My co-founder, Jillian Reddish, and I launched the Global Cannabis Network Collective at the dawning of the pandemic. And the intent behind it is really to help multinational cannabis companies all throughout the supply chain and ancillaries that are interested in expanding the global markets responsibly, ethically, and sustainably around the world. And we've brought together some amazing companies from India, Mexico, Colombia, Uruguay, most of the countries in the EU that have active or emerging markets. And we've really been able to start helping them not only convey a lot of information about what's happening in each of those markets, but also create deal flow amongst the members and help them, share knowledge to build their businesses. It's been great year. We just celebrated a year about a month and a half ago, and we're continuing to move forward. We've got some really big things coming down the pike in the next month and a half also that, we'll come back in 6 months and tell you about.
Fair enough. It's a date. Okay. There was an interesting development internationally this week. It actually made our We Talk news that we put together every week, and it follows this talk show. And it was the fact that the German stock exchange welcomed its first cannabis company this week. How significant is it? And can one of you just explain to me what it's like in Europe these days? Because I get mixed signals about, which is legal, which isn't legal. They're importing, they're exporting. A lot of countries have medical programs. What's it internationally? Nathan, we'll start with you, and I'm sure, Chris, you can jump in as well.
I think Europe's an interesting market. I know the exact date. Since November 4th of 2018, when I started in the cannabis sector, 2 countries in the world were talking about cannabis legalization: Uruguay and Canada. As of today, it's 68, with the Czech legislature saying that they should bring something forward. The wave of cannabis legalization that's moving around the States is incredibly fast, and they're developing really well, as it usually is in a political environment where people are erring on the side of caution before they move to full adult use cannabis legalization. You've seen most of the countries legalized through medicinal. So you've seen the establishment of vibrant municipal markets, which have a great way to onboard and have government oversight to really slowly introduce them onto what cannabis can be. Because I think too often, the tropes of the past that we oversee is, especially on the political and bureaucratic side, is that, overconsumption, You're going to see incredible problems with around policing and drunk driving and increased teen use. And in fact, all of those things are not true. So, by statistically saying, so I think Europe is moving ahead. We've seen incredible movement where Ireland, Great Britain, France, Luxembourg, Germany, Malta have all made moves in the last 6 to 8 weeks. So again, what's moving is an incredible way to see cannabis companies that have an opportunity to grow domestically and create international opportunities abroad. And Europe is a big market that has a lot of money that people are paying rapt attention to.
Yeah. And Chris, obviously that's another reason why you started what you're doing, because you saw where it was going, didn't you?
Yeah. And I like playing this. I wonder what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years game. And there's certainly these milestones that happen every couple of months, which in other industries, you look at and go, well, something big might happen every 5-10 years. I think watching the stock exchanges around the world is interesting, because anytime something gets listed publicly, it means that, normalization for the most part has occurred. In Europe, because you've got both the national frameworks that exist, but also the greater EU framework that they all operate within, it's particularly intriguing, because as they move forward, I think you'll start to see common policies across countries, which ultimately will make the EU a hyper competitive global market over time. Which, if the US continues to languish, will mean that we will lose any opportunity to ever be the global leader. At least it puts it at risk, in my opinion.
I apologize. Can I jump in on that part? Because I think it's an incredibly interesting part real quickly. And I'm going to shut up after this, and we'd love to hear Brian.
Oh, that's what this is about.
I'm looking forward to hearing his voice too. I think that is one of the most interesting topics of conversation, and identified unique opportunity and unique chasms of lost opportunity. And that's regulatory framework. And I think, so Canada being the first G7, the first G20 that took a federal approach that then pushed it down, that took a regulatory framework that was restrictive and had lots of ability to soften into it, is, very interesting. Because again, when you're first, especially from politicians in a bureaucratic class, you're afraid of taking that risk, right? So you make things strict and rigid that you can be like, whoa, we've learned some lessons now. We can loosen that up. And in fact, they built it into the regulatory framework in the Cannabis Act in Canada. October 17th of 2021 is the 3-year review of the Cannabis Act in Canada. And that's going to give us the opportunity to look at the world and say, what best case practice is out there that we can accommodate and change into it? Where is cannabis going that our regulatory framework needs to come up? I think most of the countries around the world are looking at Canada as the model for that. The Mexican model, it takes 80% of the Canadian system, where they've learned those 20% lessons where we've screwed it up. The delay in federal regulations and discussion in the States is an incredible burden that will have to be overcome. And the unique thing is they're now bookended by Canada and Mexico that are going to have federal legalization, and they're going to be on the outside looking in. Now, that's great for a domestic market at home, but eventually you're going to want to take the stuff at home and send it abroad. If they don't hurry up, they're going to lose that opportunity.
I don't even think it's that great for the domestic market, because while it may feel protected for a little while, the truth is everybody else is getting ready, to have products that can then come in and probably compete more strongly with locally produced stuff. It's a huge problem for the which we know. One thing I would say is, to this first entry thing and people not wanting to take risks, that means there's opportunities for some of the smaller European countries, right? Mm-hmm. To aggressively move forward what the rest of the continent will see as pilot projects. So I keep my eyes on Malta right now. I think that some of the conversations I've heard coming out of there are really, really interesting. and could create some new opportunities for the rest of the continent while they figure that stuff out. Just as a,
Same with the Commonwealth
let's see
thing.
what happens.
Same with the Commonwealth thing, right? You have 54 common nations in the Commonwealth that all have Commonwealth law and same judicial and parliamentary systems. There's some really interesting opportunities as Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, and Canada all are either going through legalization or legalized. So, the Commonwealth is going to be one of those trade blocks also that's going to be very interesting when it comes to regulatory acceptance and the test pilots.
So yeah, when you bring that up, I mean, that really kind of brings UK into the conversation, and I've spoken to a lot of folks currently in the UK trying to lobby for some framework of, legalization within the UK, or at least a more widely accepted policy around medical usage. And even a trial group. There's something happening right now in London where they're trying to put a trial group together where they can model a kind of the mini industry in London and then get some of those learnings out of London and export that across UK. The one thing though I think that seems to always be missing in a lot of these conversations about legalization and regulations is really around consumers. And I think Canada got a lot of things wrong early on, and then they started to course correct because they recognized that, hey, we've taken the perspective of the consumers out of the conversation. We've just said, oh yes, we've legalized cannabis, so come here. And really the conversation should have been about what is it that these consumers need, whether it's on the recreational and medical standpoint, and how can we as, whether policymakers or companies, how can we develop or create an industry that meets consumers where they want to be met? And that's the only way that you can really address what's happening from, taking, a legacy market and hopefully trying to convert some of these sales into a legal framework. It's not by ignoring what has happened, but by understanding that consumer. So I think the same thing that's happening in Europe or is happening around the world. I hope that a lot of these frameworks look at, you'll make a big mistake in creating any regulation or any policies that is removed from what the people in that market are looking for, that they need, that they want. And if you do so, you're always going to have this legacy market just nipping at the back of the heels, in an industry where people are trying to build, businesses to raise families and sustain and build something for the next generation.
I want to get David.
There's so much there. There is.
Well, I knew that the three of you would talk, and it's great because I don't have to. And I know my audience appreciates that as well. The mute button seems to get used a lot when I start talking. But David, do you remember about a few years ago when I think we first met at a cannabis convention, I sent you an article and it was talking about cannabis becoming a commodity on the futures market and being traded, and there'd be a wholesale price. And then I checked with the #1 derivatives attorney in the world, my brother, and he also concurred with you. Are we going to see that? And how long does it take to set a wholesale international price? I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I bet you guys do. Go ahead, David.
Me?
Yeah.
International?
Well, you're the one who told me that you think it definitely will happen.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. As soon as marijuana is legalized at the federal level, you're going to see all different markets in the U.S. jump into it. One will be like commodity futures, because Coca-Cola is not going to sell flour. Anybody who thinks Coca-Cola is going to take flour is out of their mind. Coca-Cola is going to take some component of the plant and mix it with something to make a drink. And as soon as you get away from flour, you're breaking the plant down. And when you're breaking the plant down, all of a sudden, what you care about is the chemical composition. So you're going to have people who are going to be looking to buy, however it's going to be sold, 25-gallon, 30-gallon, 55-gallon drums, but in some quantity. You're going to want to buy that product, and you're not going to care where it was grown or how it was grown. All you're going to care is it's been lab tested, it's clean, it's got the terpene profile I want, it's got the right THC content, and I'm not on the chemical side of things. I'm much more on the business side of it. So I clearly don't understand it, but I understand markets well enough to know it will develop that way. And you're going to see everything but flour is just going to become, you'll be buying it. Industrial users will buy it in bulk. And it'll be traded. It's going to be no different than what happened with Lehman Brothers and cotton in the 1800s. When Lehman when the Lehman Brothers started realizing they could make more money bailing up everybody else's cotton and selling it for them. And that's how Lehman Brothers came to be, the investment banking house.
Wow.
The
Nathan, what
former
do you
investment
think?
banking house.
So a couple of things. I agree, but it won't happen in the States. I'm sorry. It'll be more oriented in Germany or Canada. The way that legalization has rolled out in the Americas, that's not going to be possible because most cannabis that is internationally grown and going to be commoditized, and exactly what they said, is going to have to be EU GMP certified. The European Union standard for certification of chemical balance and good manufacturing process will become the industry standard. And very few, there's 11 companies in the world that have EU GMP certified facilities. None in the States, as far as I understand. That's going to be a long way to get that to, because that's a federal standard that you're going to have to ask state-based growers to recapitalize to bring them up to that standard, which are very onerous. So I actually think that market will exactly happen, but I don't know if it'll be oriented in the States just because of the process that'll have to go to get that there.
Chris, what did you think of that?
Yeah, when you talk about commoditization in the US, there's a very emotional response from a number of sectors, which will say, no, it'll never happen. But the rational business response is it will happen. The timing of when it happens, I think, is still unpredictable. I do think that, again, because of what we were talking about earlier with sort of the progress that's been made in Europe, be more likely to lead the way for a very long time. But the US is based on capitalism, and they will figure out a way to participate. So eventually, once we get past all of this propagandic nonsense and really into the business of cannabis worldwide, I will tell you now, I've already had conversations with companies in sub-Saharan Africa, with companies in South America, with companies in Europe, talking about this very model. So it really won't matter what the US says about it. It will happen for sure. There's already people planning on it. So
again, look at the Commonwealth. Yeah. Look at the Commonwealth. It has same judicial system, same parliamentary system, common law, and it has a 54 nation trading bloc. Like, there is a Commonwealth Trade Pact that actually is a member of the Commonwealth. If you're going to start there, I could see it happening there and then it continuing to expand from there.
And I think it will happen very, very quickly once we get through this initial phase where, we really are still working on once pilot programs in Europe are no longer pilot programs, right? So we've got 3 or 4 years for several of them. And it really starts to take hold. It's not going to take very long because people don't need flower. They need the plant derivatives to make most of their products.
So the manufacturing section of the industry is probably the greatest upside?
For what we're talking about, there's always going to be this niche, right, which will still exist and not be part of the commoditization. And, if we include hemp, of course, which I think we should, then it just gets there faster.
Isn't the hemp market going to dwarf the cannabis market, guys, eventually?
I think that, it really depends. I think once we start to see hemp utilized beyond its current use, I do think that there's massive opportunity with hemp. I think that from an industrial hemp standpoint, we're still just scratching the surface. Right. But then when you look at that industrial hemp market, China really owns it. Morocco is really massive in it. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, when things do open up on a global scale, because there's already a lot of companies and countries in Europe. There's a huge hemp producers out of there. And I'm not quite sure if in North America, we've had that base infrastructure to catch up to Asia and to Europe in regards to hemp.
Yeah. And Brian,
especially with the price of lumber. That is going to be a big thing, right? Like when you're talking about 800% growth in lumber prices, you're going to start looking at what else you can do, grow, process, and develop and bring to market quicker. I think that is going to be a really interesting thing that is going to help speed up the industrial hemp movement.
And if you do look at countries like China and India, and just based on sheer population and the fact that hemp already plays a very prominent role, you got to remember those countries dwarf, I mean, the rest of us. So we are tiny in relative terms. So there's going to be a lot of catching up to do, but it will, again, become a very big global market.
Yeah,
the only thing holding it back is stigma. So
100%. And I think what the opportunity is around brands, right? It's that global hemp brand, because, you know, as we commoditize some of these items, and they will become commoditized, and you think that any agri sector business, I mean, all the large CPGs have commodity traders and they're buying commodities at, you know, in large quantities. So it makes sense eventually if cannabis is, you know, especially continent-wide, you know, legalized, that, you know, commodity trading is going to be, or commodity wholesale buying can be a big portion of this. But, you know, the brands, I think, and that's where, you know, Canada, the Commonwealth, you know, United States has the huge opportunity is creating brands that consumers love, consumers trust. Again, coming back to this consumer story, who will start to dictate, this is what we want and this is where we're going to go. And that will drive, I think, a lot of obviously capital, but also will give an indication to a lot of people that, you know, growing just hemp is not enough. You're going to have to do a bit more than that, just like Coca-Cola has to do with just a bit more than, you know, selling, you know, sugar water or carbonated sodas. They wrap it with a brand and a lifestyle that people can really attach themselves to. And I think, you know, still some of that is missing, especially, I would say, in the hemp side of things.
I apologize.
No, Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Brian has twice gone back to something that needs to be at the core of this conversation is consumers, right? So I would actually say Canadian legalization and American legalization has primarily focused, Stats Canada, which is our organization that collects data nationally, self-declared Canadians at 22 to 26% prior to legalization identified they were consuming cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that means we're still fighting for that market share. Okay, which is interesting because that means 74 to 78% of Canadians aren't using cannabis products. The opportunity around diversification of cannabis that gets you high as an inebriant and cannabis that is a wellness product or an industrial product forces the conversation into the 74 to 78. That is the greatest opportunity for the cannabis sector, because I don't know about you, I'd much rather chase 74 to 78% than 24 or 22 to 26%. And I think research and innovation, productization, value-added agricultural and consumer products, those are the kind of things where Canadians and Americans can lead to create that opportunity. The largest decortalization plant for hemp in the world is in Bakerville, Alberta, at a federally funded institution that's funded by taxpayers. And nobody gave a care about them when they were doing incredible research for 18 years when nobody paid attention. And now they're the belle of the ball, right? Those are the kind of things that we're going to see. And one last statistic, because I'm a statistics guy, so I'm addicted to it, is that 74 to 78% of Canadians. And I bet you that demographic is relatively similar in the States. I guess there's three statistics. One, the fastest growing consumer group in cannabis in Canada is seniors, right? Mm-hmm. Two, from 2004 to 2019, the average age of cannabis consumers in Canada went from 24.7 to 38.9. And 66% of Canadians who said they haven't tried cannabis, which again is 74 to 78%, said they want to try it in ingestible form. That's restaurants, that's consumption lounges, that's a whole tourism and hospitality industry that has been destroyed by COVID. What an incredible opportunity to combine cannabis with tourism and hospitality and let people who are that 78% have a drink, an infused meal, put chefs back to work, put servers back to work, which just also happens to be the sector that hires the largest amount of the underemployed in North America, 18 to 25. So I think those are how the conversations, the statistics that we use to change the conversation. And I completely agree with Brian that that 24 to 26%, or pardon me, 22 to 26% of those legacy people, we have to do a better job coming in. But why aren't we talking about that 74 to 78%? And I think that's where we change the conversation.
Wow. Well, I've got to tell you, this is by far the most quiet I've been on a show in a long time. And that means the conversation's been terrific to listen to. So I appreciate where we're going with this. And of course, we're up against the clock now, and we're going to say goodbye to Brian Sekandi. By the way, where can you get your book, and give another plug? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So the book right now is available on Amazon, pretty much most of the Amazon marketplace, Kindle and paperback format. We are going to have the book available at a couple of dispensaries as well. But you can check us out at kidsatcannabis.com, or you can check out our job search engine, which is careerscannabis.com. We have jobs across the United States and Canada. I think at the moment we have about 11 or 12,000 jobs posted, all categorized and easy for you guys to be able to search.
There you go. All right. Well, Brian, thank you again. Nathan and Chris, you're going to stick around because we've got another two people coming in. One I know you guys are familiar with, Bruce Linton, and the other one is Martin Condon from the UK. He hosts a podcast in Ireland, and he and I have been together once or twice on the podcast world, and I figured it would be great to have a guy with a really good accent to add to this conversation internationally. So he'll be joining us. We'll continue with the Green Rush Live after this break. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, "Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life." Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. Hi, Jimmy Young here, and I have to ask you, are you secure? If you're in the cannabis industry, you have to have security for your grow facility or dispensary. And we are so happy to welcome Salient Systems to our group of supporters. You get to call their rep. His name is Ben Shower at SalientSys.com. So don't even wait an hour. Call Ben Shower at 413-333-7974.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
For every Friday afternoon, we gather a great cadre of guests. Chris has stayed with us, Nathan stayed with us, and we've got two additional guests. Bruce Linton, who's been on the show several times, and Martin from Martin's World from the other side of the pond.
Ireland. And who are you?
I'm David Rabinovitz, your sidekick, Jimmy.
That's right. Thank you. And I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. This is Green Rush Live. We do this every Friday. We talk about the business of cannabis. And for those of you who might be tuning in just for this segment, I apologize for repeating myself. A reminder to go onto our website and give me your cannabis story. Come out of the cannabis closet, if you will, and share your story with us. And you could win a prize. We'll be sharing all these stories. I love the idea of putting together an hour's worth of everybody's story, because they'll come from different parts of the world and different ways how this plant has played a role in their lives. And Martin, again, thank you so much for staying up late. You get the prize. You get to go home with the centerpiece because you're up at 11 o'clock at night, your time, or 10 o'clock, whatever it is. And we appreciate that. And Bruce Linton, always a pleasure to see you. And I'm really glad that you continue to wear your playoff beard and avoid the barbershop, okay?
Well, clearly I don't cheer for Toronto because they're out, so I could have shaved.
But that's a tradition, isn't it, Toronto? I could not believe this was the year. I thought this was the year.
You know, the best line I saw was that because the arenas have restricted audiences, they let 500 medical workers come in. And the joke was that's a great idea because when the team choked so badly, it was good to have all those medically skilled people there.
Oh my gosh. You know, I am from Boston and I remember the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s when we weren't championship city. You know what? It just will make the time when they finally win that much sweeter.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was nothing.
Like when the Toronto Raptors won and there was millions of people on the streets. It'll be even crazier than that. And that was the craziest parade we've ever seen, I think, ever. So, you know, can't even imagine.
That's right. And you know what? 2004, it's just the year that was so amazing in Boston because that was the year that the Red Sox won their first World Series. And, you know, for someone who was there when the ball went through Buckner's legs. I was there when Bucky Dent hit a home run in the net in 1978 and ruined my Yom Kippur. So, I mean, I have lived the losing side and I have enjoyed the championship side. That being said, we're talking about cannabis. And because we have an international forum, I do want to start with Martin, because we talked a lot in that last half hour, and I don't know if you were monitoring or not, but about the changes and what's going on in Europe. And Nathan had this incredible stat about over the last 6 to 8 months, was it, Nathan, that like 66 countries are now actively looking at medical marijuana programs. Is that accurate?
It's since 2018, where it was 2, Uruguay and Canada, to today. Yep. It's now 68 countries around the world are talking cannabis legalization.
Wow. And Martin, what kind of effect has that had in Ireland?
Well, it's definitely having a bigger effect, but it's been slow progress over here. I don't know if you've seen the recent research that just came out of the UK only in the last few days, where they were talking about cannabis being shown to be 96% effective at reducing seizures in children. 96% effective. That's a rather highly effective medicine.
Yes, and it's also one of the reasons why the only, FDA approved drug for seizures is Epidiolex in the United States. I think I've got that off the top of my head. I think I did.
Definitely, yeah. But a very interesting one with the Epidiolex is it's not shown to be as effective as some of the other products, where with the Epidiolex, it's actually only been shown to be 50% effective. And the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, will actually pay for that for patients. but they won't pay for the more effective cannabis medicines coming from companies like Bedrocan in Holland. So it's still there's a lot going on here, but still not enough for the patients. It's the patients who are really suffering. You see on the London Stock Exchange recently, some big players getting involved. I think David Beckham was mentioned out there, you know, getting involved in some of these CBD companies where they're growing CBD and like in labs using yeast and stuff like that and calling it cannabis. It's a funny one that's developing over here at the moment.
And Bruce, as someone who always has his pulse on the scene of cannabis, what's your overall assessment of where this market will be going in Europe over the next year or 2 years?
I think Europe has the most rational regulatory platform, and it's not all the same, but I'm saying, like, if you want to take blood from a human to see how bioavailable cannabis was, I'd do that in the Czech Republic. If I wanted to actually see drug-on-drug interaction across all cannabinoids, I do that in Germany. And so as you look at the European opportunity in the UK part of it, I think the third wave of products which are going to have intellectual property protection, true efficacy, and science-driven agendas, which will be most appealing to pharmaceutical players, are all going to come from Europe. Like you saw, Boris with Cura made an acquisition in Europe. I don't know that he actually wants to be in Europe. He just doesn't want to miss Europe. And so he needs to have that. I know at least 2 other MSOs that are sniffing around looking at science-based agendas in Europe, because there's more R&D occurring, I think, in Europe. And if you look at published papers, there are a lot coming out of there than anywhere else in the world. Canada got super regulated and then missed the agenda opportunity to actually do research. So I'm massively bullish on Europe as the next wave of really intellectual property, outcome driven. And they might not, when I say medicines, some of them will be in front of the pharmaceutical counter, right? It might be a better head lice shampoo. It might be a better whatever. And some of them will be behind the counter where the pharmacist hands them out. And the reason that's relevant is if you want to make money, you need to invest in both. It's a long wait to get behind the pharmacist's counter, and it's not as defensible to be in front.
Well, and okay, if I can just add on, and I think I completely agree. And the one I'm sure, Bruce, that you guys have looked at quite a bit in all the things that you've done is the cannabinoids and the minor cannabinoids and all of the development that comes and opportunities that come from that. Like, we too often only hyper talk about THC and CBD, and we forget about all of the opportunities that come from that. THCV, we talked about food and tourism and hospitality in the last sector. This is a product that's a naturally grown, that's an appetite suppressant, right? Like there's so many opportunities out there. And again, Europe's leading the way. Incredible companies and work in Estonia and the Czech Republic that are actually doing those minor cannabinoids. And whoever owns those and those formalizations and then the layering, that is going to get very interesting of what the opportunities that come out of that.
You're bang on. So one of the companies I'm involved with is in Denmark. So what the heck, Denmark? Like, do you like pickled fish or something? No, I'm not a huge fan of that. But the government of Denmark actually invests in companies doing clinical research to turn rare cannabinoids into not rare cannabinoids. So we can see what the hell they're available. When we had a quantity, what do they do to a species that would absorb them? And so wouldn't you like to know, of all those ones which we don't talk about, if they weren't rare and you could have a dosage, what is the effect on the human condition? What's the effect on, say, any other mammal? And so I think I'm all in for Europe. And I got to say, like, Ireland has caught me off guard almost as much as Poland. Poland caught me off guard even more, because if you think the effect of, like, the type of governance they had in Poland, the effect of the church, the fact that they actually have a medical platform and you can actually do stuff in Poland continues to be the most surprising European state to actually have adopted a cannabis strategy.
With an interesting current government that is known for its openness when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. So Ireland,
the complete opposite of that. So it was very surprising.
Martin, I think you do a terrific job of not. My assistant Olivia is from Ireland, and many people will comment to me how nice she is, and I say, I think that's terrific that you must have been able to understand what the hell she was saying. Because she gets all excited, and I'm telling you, it's just like a machine gun going off with all these things. But she's been watching home, and it's creeping along. But like, your circumstance is a tough piece of work, right? The UK NHS, they make it available, then they make it prohibitively expensive.
All right, now I got to, since we talked to, there's money, I heard expensive. Chris, I'm going to bring you back in here because this is important, because it's going to play to the American businessman ego. You know, America always wants to be the best, right? And Nathan, we talked about some of the challenges in various states and where we're at politically right now. How in the world is Europe and all these other nations going to pass the American buck? The people in the United States want to invest early so they make the biggest return on their investment. Americans are going to sit on the sidelines here?
Well, it's not for lack of desire, right? I mean, there's certainly plenty of desire there for people who are paying attention. We've got other political problems here, right, that have sort of sidelined a lot of the international opportunities. But what I've seen is for those who really do pay attention, they're not waiting. They're just quietly shifting into Europe, you know, and they're shifting into Canada, and they're participating. You look at some of the deals that were done early on as Canada legalized, right? There's huge amounts of American involvement in these deals, and there will continue to be. The real question is whether or not the U.S. government will get out of the way, or at least create some sort of structure that allows the country to benefit from it. Individual business people who want to play can play. They just have to look abroad. I mean, it's what we're doing at the GCNC, right? It's working with companies both outside the US and inside the US who have either existing or international aspirations in the cannabis marketplace. It's there, Jimmy, and everybody on this call knows that really, really well. It's just governmental political foolishness and ignorance.
Can I ask just one quick question? Because there's some interesting people that you can ask. I actually have been starting to wonder when you see the numbers coming out of Illinois, which is a great example, where cannabis revenues have exceeded alcohol revenues in those states.
Right.
If the states are dragging their heels because they want to collect the taxation without the feds getting a double touch. So I actually think that's going to be an interesting part of the conversation, because let's be honest, all of that explosion in the states is because the states are looking and going, holy shit, look at all that new revenue. I want me some of that.
Agreed.
So,
I had that conversation with a lot of folks who claim to want federal legalization. I'm like, yeah, but be careful, because you might get what you're asking for. And then you have to operate in whatever nightmare situation they build for you. So yeah, I think there is some of that. I mean, no doubt we would much prefer having a framework in the US that made sense, that everybody could use. But, you know, right now brands can still travel, product can't, and business people can still travel. I mean, outside of pandemic rules, to make things happen. So it's going to happen regardless. Inevitably we will have a federal program, but you're right, Nathan.
Nathan, to your point, if I was the governor of Colorado 6 years ago, I would have been the single biggest funder of an anti-cannabis lobby.
Yep.
Because once you move first, it's like, do you think Nevada is hugely in favor of online gaming and gaming everywhere? Worst thing that can happen to them, right? Yep. So like what you want to be is unique. And so like, it's really weird, but like they should have taken a third to half of all incremental tax revenues and funded. No one else do this. It's super dangerous.
Well, we shouldn't give that idea too much. We shouldn't give that idea too much away, because you have Vegas, Michigan, and New York State talking about consumption lounges. They could do the exact same thing and broaden the market. So I think there's still that opportunity where maybe those lessons have been learned. But as a Canadian, I want to make sure that we actually see some of that stuff here. So, but I completely agree.
Well, I'm not running for governor because it would result in me having to kill too many people prior to running, and I just don't think that's good practice.
All right, I got to ask you, Bruce, you know, the last time I think we talked, you had Rockify branding on. Now you've got another product. Come on, I know you live your brand. Tell me what it is, what's going on.
Listen, if you go on Jimmy's show and you're not selling something, you got to be a psycho. So I'm selling something. And so this is Oscare Capital. So I did two things thinking about your show. I got my European hat. So Oscare is Oskare Capital. Look at the team. We're already invested in 2 European entities. We've got our first close coming up on July 15th for a 150 million euro fund. And all it is about is investing in things which are not going to be proceeds of crime. So if you worry about NHS, you also have to worry about all the other stuff. And it's all designed where what we're doing is we're buying early stage IP entities that will create value products that go in front of the counter and behind the counter in a pharmacy. And we're doing that because every pharmaceutical company still can't really move.
Right.
It's because until the US is fully in play, they're kind of staying away. So I put that on. The other thing is I bought a Czechoslovakian beer. I was going to have a cannabis drink, but I thought, no, this is international. I can't get those. So I got my brand here. I did that. Like, Jimmy, this is as close to shower day as it gets for me for getting ready for the whole show.
Well, it's not smell-o-vision. It's okay, Bruce. All right.
Well, like beer is a great point. Boston Brewing announced a Canadian move 2 weeks ago, right? Like people are looking to get into the game, and if pharmaceuticals can't move, the other side and other people are going to look to move. So it was a great. He was clairvoyant, right? You already knew because you wanted to talk about Samuel Adams and coming out to the
and who did they hire to run their Canadian stuff? Some guy who learned a little bit at Canopy.
He did.
Yeah.
Paul's a great guy.
I know that he's pretty good at, like, he's always wearing the brand, but I think they got a good guy there. And there's a lot of still white space and intellectual property around that stuff.
Yep.
David, you with us?
I am. I'm looking at the chat to see if we've got some additional questions coming in.
So you got anything for us?
Not yet.
Okay.
And by the way, Kurt said he needs a full 45 minutes to explain why he's awesome.
Can I bring attention to something that's actually going on in the UK, I suppose, right
go
now,
ahead.
if you're not aware of it. There's actually a mother and a son who has epilepsy, currently making a 1,000-mile journey from the north of Ireland over to the House of Parliament in the UK. And basically the son is Billy Caldwell and the mother is Charlotte Caldwell. And they're trying to raise awareness around the lack of access to medical cannabis. And again, the many parents out there, there's some parents in the UK who've actually had to sell their family home to continue funding some of these cannabis medicines over there. I only interviewed Karen Gray the other day, a Scottish mother whose young 8-year-old son also suffers with seizures, but she has to fundraise for her the medication for her son too. So Charlotte and Billy are marching across the UK now to raise awareness for that. They should arrive at the UK Parliament on the 14th of June. So just keep an eye on that maybe.
But Martin, why do politicians do this in every country? They fight with sick kids and their parents until they lose and change policy. And right now, the politicians never win that fight, but they always fight it. So what was the lady with the daughter that caused the whole UK to change, say July, 2 years ago? You recall?
Was that with Alfie Dingley, or are you recalling Ireland with Vera Twomey?
No, it was in the UK where basically they were fighting with a sick kid and the mom, and they lost, and they as they always do. And then they say, we're going to make the regs so you can have access, but you might as well like smash car windows to get money because there's no way you can pay the price that they make it available on. And so they won't just lose the fight elegantly and let access. So then some folks got to march all the way down. It is the most repeated stupidity I've seen in the sector.
Canada had to fight its way to the Supreme Court for the exact same thing, right? Like, you know that better than most. The only challenge is we don't have a charter of Britain doesn't have a charter of rights and freedom in the same way as Canada does. But it is very surprising that we haven't seen a flood of legal challenges to NHS policy in using Canada and South Africa. South Africa's legalization is based on Canadian Commonwealth law. I think that's some of the veins that we'll see, but health services, we have to change that conversation. And the more that we can break down those tropes, it's unfortunate that often it has to be through the judicial system. That's what's really crazy.
Yeah, Chris, the judicial system has not been too friendly to the voters' ballot box initiatives in the United States, the free democracy of the United States here. I'm very upset about what happened in Mississippi. The voters put in medical marijuana by 74%, and then the Mississippi Supreme Court said, no, unconstitutional, can't do it. That goes so to the soul of democracy, doesn't it? You're smiling, but this is an issue here in this country.
The reason I'm smiling is because you keep bringing me in on the U.S. crazy. We all know this is a problem. It's why
I'm going to go to David on this. He's the only other American on the panel.
It's the reason I prefer, in a lot of ways, working with international markets at the moment, because we can make a bigger impact more quickly, working collectively externally. And if you if you read The Art of War, right, and you look at, if you've got a key problem in the middle, but you're too small individually to conquer it, then you surround it, and you make it so compelling outwardly that eventually, once you've established all that, you can come in and invade and crush the problem. That's what I feel like we're doing internationally, right? Get the EU growing quicker. Canada is legal. Mexico is coming on board. South America is coming on quickly. Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, all of these. Leave the US on an island, highlight the hypocrisy and the lunacy and the missed opportunity economically, and eventually they will have no choice but to recognize that this foolishness left over from 150 years of propaganda and stigma will eventually fall by the wayside for most. So I'm only smiling because otherwise I have to cry. And it's just too painful, really, because it is silly. I'm glad to be in Colorado, working from a state that's been fairly forward thinking on all of this. When I came into cannabis, I was actually based in Texas for 15 years. And if you want to highlight a place that's really messed up and how they're looking at cannabis, I mean, that would be sort of the poster child, I think.
Wouldn't you say, like, if you look at your political landscape, 2 elections ago, the reason Trudeau in large part won a majority in Canada is he promised adults they'd be allowed to do what they might want without going to jail. And that got a lot of people out to vote, and it motivated them to see him in a different light. If I'm running the Democrats, I hate to say it, I won. What I need to do is win again. And the only way I'm going to win again is to get people off their ass, off the couch, and vote. And so what I would do is, there's no chance between now and a run up to the next election, I would do anything other than drumbeat. And then I would say, if you elect me, and this polls super well, this I will do in my first 100 days or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would just leave this as my, to me, it's a no-brainer, man. Politics is all about winning again. And I would use this in that way. And I don't think it's coward.
Well, they had to turn away from it during the last election, right? Because they were engaging, and then the history of the current political regime was highlighted, and it's not particularly friendly towards cannabis. And so I agree with you, Bruce. It's now sort of a matter of do just enough that people will kind of believe that maybe, I hope they're telling the truth before the next election, and I'll give you my vote. Because, I mean, from what we can see, right, 3 years from now, it doesn't seem likely all of this current cluster will dissolve. So I think you're right. I would love to see him actually pull the trigger. I think
he steps down, she steps forward. He's not in favor. She's going to be cool. I'm the first lady president. If you vote for me, I need you to get off your ass and vote. A bunch of things that compel you. One of them is I'm going to regulate cannabis in the same way, because they're going to look so crazy compared to the rest of the world by then. Like, I would just keep that sucker in a cup and use it as my next win.
What do you think? I think we might get the Safe Banking Act, though. Like, I think
you'll get safe banking. You'll get safe banking. That'll be the placate. If I can jump in on just one point, because I think there's a couple of really crazy points on this point. Is, by the way, the most popular public policy in the United States for Democrats and Republicans is cannabis legalization.
Yeah, it's
right. So we got to keep that in mind. The other two things that are two of the great motivators in politics of the three is re-election, shame, and money. The world is passing you by. You're losing the opportunity to make a lot of money, and you're leaving it on the table, and it's costing American jobs. That's a pretty easy narrative to write. The challenge is, just like we talked about before, the states are like, I kind of like the fact that the feds aren't doing anything, because we'll keep rolling out these state initiatives and we'll make the money. So I'm interested on that.
I agree, but I think the best outcome is states' rights with banking, so that every state governs it their own way. The FDA doesn't have an obligation to act, because the worst outcome is the FDA then steps in and all of a sudden we go back to the dark ages for 10 years.
The only challenge is your cannabis will be trapped in America forever because of the international regime, and that might be okay.
Do your science. You know what I found about German people and British people, and even Irish people. Even Irish people.
Even Irish.
They all have the same sleep problems. So if you can figure out science to cause sleep, if you can figure out science to cause weight loss, it doesn't matter who the hell you figure it out on. You export intellectual property, not stupid ingredients.
Bruce, it sounds like you're making medical claims about cannabis. As a Canadian, you know we're not allowed to talk about that.
You know what I mean?
I have to ask you to refrain.
Yeah, but you can see like that would unlock MIT, Harvard, all those colleges and universities could actually do work to create outcomes. Why would you get excited about exporting ingredients? You know where most of the ingredients for medicine come from? India. You know where most of the applications for patents come? Not India. So like, let India grow all the inputs by that point in time. You got to nail the IP, and we need to have a platform which would allow that. I do think states' right with banking would do that.
All right, so that's great. We just solved the problem, and I agree 100% with that. Nathan and Chris, we're at the bottom of the half hour. You guys have been terrific, and you're welcome back here anytime. Very simple, and I hope you will keep in touch. How do people get in touch with you, Nathan, if they want to talk to you?
They can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and of course, diplomatconsulting.com. Love to have a conversation.
And Chris?
I am very easy to find on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest, or alwaysdriveinnovation.com. We're there with the Global Cannabis Network Collective. So thanks so much, Jimmy. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Appreciate it, guys. This is really a great conversation. Thank you so much. And we are going to welcome back an old friend in the next half hour. It's the return of Kurt Dalton from cannabis.net. Okay, on the Green Rush Live. Don't go away. We'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, it's a whole new world of weed. But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
And welcome back for the final segment of the Green Rush. We do this every Friday from 4 to 6. We've got a few people who've stayed with us, Martin and Bruce. We're bringing on Jay Rosenthal and returning Mr. Kurt Dalton of Cannabis.net.
The wicked awesome dad himself. Kurt, welcome back.
The Celtics logo is for you, Jimmy, the Celtics logo.
I appreciate that. I buried them on Tuesday night. I'm sorry. It is what it is. We move on. I do like the fact that they've changed regime now a little bit, and we're going to see what happens next. I'd love for Sam Cassell to be the next coach. I'm on record of saying that now. That being said, we're talking about cannabis. Kurt and Jay, you guys, I don't know if you've been monitoring this conversation, but it's really been great because A, I haven't had to say much, and B, I think we've brought up some really interesting things to talk about. Jay, first of all, tell everybody again where you're from, what you're all about, and then Kurt, we'll go to you next. Go ahead.
Well, don't feel bad, Jimmy. It's hard to talk when Nathan is on anyway, because he likes to, he sucks up the oxygen in a very positive way. I talk to him a lot. It's good to hear from him. And it's nice. Thank you all. Thank you for allowing me to be here again on the show. I'm Jay, co-founder, president of Business of Cannabis. We're a B2B media publication online. We do events, we do research, we do a lot of online events now, and we do a daily podcast and video series called BFC Live. And yeah, we are based in Toronto. We do a lot in Canada, but increasingly looking at US markets. Yesterday, we did an online event with the Canadian Industry Association of South Dakota. So we're expanding our wings into the States, especially in emerging markets, where frankly, they're having a lot of the conversations that we've had in Canada for some time. It was interesting talking about local zoning regulations in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and how they're thinking about it, not that dissimilarly as how sort of Toronto thought about it a couple years back. So that's who we are. You can find us at businessofcannabis.com, and thank you for having me. Right. Oh, but also I'm from Boston. So I when I see something that says wicked awesome, it doesn't even ring a bell as being awkward, actually.
That's right. And it's not, and I love how people who are from other cities around Boston claim that we're all from Boston. And I can relate because I grew up in Newton and you're from Natick. Let's go on the record for that. Kurt, where the hell are you in Massachusetts, right?
Yep. I'm up here a little north of Boston, and it's great to return to the show. You said you were having Gandalf on again, and I said, I got to see what he looks like these days because, you know, Bruce Litton was big back when Lord of the Rings came out. So let's bring him out of retirement. It's good to be back. So.
Wow. I love the fact that you've been bugging me part of the day as your opening act.
That's what I said. You went before me, buddy. You're opening for the Beatles now. Sorry.
Martin, I feel bad. I really do feel bad that I got you involved with this now because, you got to jump in here and help us out a little bit because these two have known each other for a long time. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Kurt, I wouldn't even know who Bruce Linton was. Okay. So again, I can thank him, and Bruce, you can blame him. How's that?
So Martin, just the reason I know Kurt is there's a lot of people who pretend, and then there are people who show up. And so he's always showed up everywhere. You'd never know where the heck he's going to turn up. And I bugged him this week. I said, when I speak to you on the phone, I find it almost unbelievable to believe how articulate you are when you write. Because when you speak to him on the phone, it's like talking to a 200-pound 9-year-old. And then when you read his stuff, it's hilariously well done. And you go, what the heck? How are these the same people?
Well, Canadians are nice. I think Bruce is saying I stalk him because you never know where I'm going to show up, and I'm always right behind him. But thank you.
And did anything happen this week in the news? Let me see. What's the lead on We Talk News that follows this show? It had something to do with the largest retailer in the world not doing any kind of drug testing for cannabis. Would you have any insight on that at all, Mr. Dalton? I
am very familiar with the intricacies of how Amazon works. And that was probably the biggest story in a while for this industry, getting the support not only on the headline, for the politicians in the world to see, because most people love Amazon, whether it's getting packages or streaming their videos or anything to do with Amazon. But the interesting part was everybody said, oh, the Amazon's going to sell weed, get ready. And I was like, not so fast. It's really about their workforce. The problem right now for Amazon and in America is getting people back to work with all the benefits. In America here, we have an extra $300 still going on for unemployment. And Amazon is notoriously a low-paying outfit. They offer midnight to 8 a.m. shifts on their mega cycle pick and pack sorting. And they were losing, believe it or not, a large percentage of people to failing the marijuana drug test. So while this may sound like a very benevolent and interesting headline and Amazon's progressive, it's really about they've actually taken the marijuana testing out of their 5-panel drug testing out. For their employees. And interesting breaking news today on clarification from Amazon, it is now includes drivers. It is now the drivers as well will not be tested for marijuana. They will be tested for amphetamines, heroin, that kind of stuff. But your Amazon driver pulling in your driveway, and certainly shouldn't be high while he's driving, but at night can now enjoy a joint as he would a beer or a drink and be able to go to work the next day without fear of losing his job through a drug test.
And I actually took it from that 40,000-mile view above that anyway. And I just wonder if other retailers now will follow. Jay, what's your feeling about that?
Well, the Wall Street Journal just did a deep dive, and I listened to a podcast of the reporter who wrote it. And this is, I think part of it is getting people back to work, but part of it is, Amazon's located in Washington, so it's a little bit different there. But more and more states coming online, more and more employers are going to have to do this. And by the way, there are really good employees that smoke pot, whether medicinally or otherwise. And it's probably better for them and better for the workers, better for the employer, better for the employee and the employer if they smoke weed. That said, this is going to be something that happens more and more. The more states that come online, the more employers in these places. And I think it's big when it's Amazon. I think it's probably less big when it's mom and pop shop down the road that is still testing. But I think this is part of the wave, and they are certainly a big one because it is of course about their own employees, but there was also a bit about them supporting other legalization efforts or not standing in the way. And I think, look, they are in the consumer packaged goods delivery business in some cases, in many cases, and this is a very popular one. And I'm sure it's popular with their employees. It's popular in Seattle for sure. And it's popular here in, big Amazon communities all over the place.
Certainly, but you have to wonder what kind of support they're going to give. Will it be support that you would want? You see something that happened, was it in Massachusetts there recently, where there was a boycott of a number of brands because of it was the CEO of I think it was the Massachusetts Cannabis Association or something. He spoke out against almost like speaking out against homegrown, over-regulating the caregivers there who are growing for patients. You wonder why that is. And obviously he said he wants to be able to sell. I think Massachusetts has 250,000 caregivers, or 70,000 caregivers catering for 250,000 patients. And the CEO obviously wants a slice of that pie. So you have to wonder what kind of support maybe Amazon would give. Would they be hopefully supporting the rights for people to be able to continue like that?
David, you have insight on this, I think.
Well, so I think you're talking about the president of the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition.
That's the one. Yeah.
Right? And he has spoken about the caregiver issues in Massachusetts as well as up in Maine.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
And-
I only know that, Martin, because I'm the treasurer. I'm on that board as well.
Oh, so you're involved with these guys?
Yeah.
Oh,
Shady
fair.
bunch.
David's a made man in Massachusetts. Don't worry.
yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
What was that one, Kurt?
David's a made man. Don't worry.
Made man, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's actually going on there? So is there a problem with people actually growing in that manner? Is there a need for this overregulation? Because from what I'm getting on the ground from some of the caregivers is that they feel like they're going to be displaced. They won't be able to keep up with some of the regulations.
Well, there is a movement. I think there's been movements. Let me back up a minute. So
Yeah.
in 2012, we legalized marijuana for medical purposes. In 2016, we legalized it for recreational purposes. The group that was most against legalization in 2016, the medical marijuana operators. So the people who 4 years prior had been fighting because they wanted the industry to open up, we're now against expanding the industry. It's kind of like immigration, right? It's sure, the door should be open, but we should close it right as soon as I get through type thing. So what you have is the operators in various states pile on because they don't want expansion they want to keep the market to themselves. And there have been some of the larger players through their associations have been moving to try to limit what caregivers can do. And the nonprofits like MASSCANN are fighting to make sure that's as wide open as possible with as few restrictions as possible, because people who are using marijuana for medical purposes shouldn't get jammed up with high prices that they can't afford, or if they're growing it at home, running into problems, right? So that's what those issues are about. There's a lot of fighting going on to make sure that the caregivers can survive and that small players can survive.
We had the same thing in Canada, right? We had in the transition from the grow your own, there were a number of court cases which said, first you can have it, but we don't have any, so grow your own. Then it said, well, I'm not well enough to grow my own, somebody else can grow for me. And so you started having this grooming up. And then you started having a situation where if you looked at an analysis of the country, it was very unusual in that there were 3 super concentrated areas of sick people. And one of them happened to be the headquarter area for the biggest sort of organized bike gang crowding the country. And so if you could use the assets of a legal shield to grow way more than you're permitted to grow, aggregate it together, and then maybe or maybe not sell it all, who knows where it went. It wasn't that a majority of the people were screwing with it, but a majority of the illegal stuff was being done where you couldn't go to jail because you couldn't get off. And I don't know what the circumstances in various states, but that was the primary reason Canada changed the regulations to actually allow for a structured growing process, because the police said there's no chance we can enforce this. And we don't care if you grow 5 or 10 plants at your house. We care about the guy with 40,000 plants in a greenhouse who's a medical grower, and this stuff's turning up all over the place. And so like this evolution of that platform, as long as it's not exploited, works, but it's how do you manage the edges?
How do you manage human behavior? Because humans are always going to look to get that extra edge. We're all, tell me I can grow 6 plants. Okay, maybe I'll sneak in a 7th or an 8th, I mean, right?
Yeah, no, the issue in Canada was they're adding 2 zeros. Shit, I thought it said 7,000 plants. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was 7. I'm a dumb Canadian. How would I know that said not 7,000? I'm not a good counter. Like 1, 2, 3, 7,000.
But is that not because it's in its infancy, still legalization? It's still in its early days. When we look at other things like alcohol and tobacco, I suppose, like why are these not being bootlegged in the way as cannabis is? Like here in Ireland, we're able to brew as much alcohol as we like in terms of beer. Actually, we're not allowed to brew spirits, but nobody's selling that openly to the street. So why is it like? And I believe it's just because of it's in its infancy. I give it another 5 to 10 years, there's going to be less and less people doing this because there's going to be less and less value. A lot of the cannabis that's grown, I'd say in Canada, probably gets exported out to places probably like Ireland because they get more value for it here. So I think over time, as we see more legalization happen, there's going to be less interest in operations like this from criminals because it's going to be less and less rewarding for them. They'll move on to the next thing, whatever that might be.
Who's the biggest exporter of cannabis internationally right now, guys?
Bruce Linton.
Gotta be Canada.
Canada.
It is Canada, but I would argue among the companies, quarter to quarter, it jumps around between Canopy, Tilray, and Aurora.
And you know, when the markets start building out here, again, I can't see the United States, as screwed up as our political system is right now, and it really is. I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but I think the system is totally screwed up. I can't see that the capitalists, the people that run this country with the money behind them, are going to sit on the sidelines and watch the rest of the world make money when, you know, they're twiddling their thumbs and looking at the Constitution and saying, well, we don't really care what the people think. We're in charge. We own this place.
Well, I think there's a bit of what Bruce said. I think you best be careful what you wish for, because the industry as it exists now in the States is not set up for export, not because you're not growing enough to export. Certainly that's actually relatively easy. It's meeting the requirements of not only Canada, but more so the EU. Right, and their standards for what they will allow in and accept in, whether it's through Malta or through anywhere else. You know, EU GMP is real and it's hard to reach. And the you know, growing, you know, in the facilities that we've seen, you know, you see online in Colorado, California, both outdoor but even indoor. With you know, you go to an indoor grow in Canada, you're wearing a clean suit like it's a pharmaceutical facility. You go to a grow in Colorado, it's like, you know, it's a hoop house and with dogs around like that. These are really two different industries, two different products being produced to two different standards. And if it happens federally in the US and happens quickly and gets under FDA regulations, there's going to be a lot of business converting greenhouses to, you know, higher standards like we actually have here in Canada, but it's a high burden. And so, you know, not that US companies will allow, you know, other countries to take over Europe, but they will likely set up other facilities that are more compliant than the ones that are growing in the States. The challenge is if the FDA gets involved and now you have to have compliant product in Massachusetts and California and Colorado, that's a real burden.
But don't you already have the American Herbal Products Association over there in the US? And I think a lot of their good agricultural practices, good harvesting practices, they're very much in line with the EU's, the EU UDRELEX, which is basically, it's a bunch of guidelines again, which shows how to grow, harvest and process herbal products for medicines. I think two of those things are very much in line. So I wouldn't think it'd be too difficult, I suppose, really, if they wanted to utilize that, because it's already done for other kind of herbal products between America and Europe already.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but it's not done.
It's not
actually reaching a standard, right? But getting tested in the EU, like all those things, you know, setting up a full infrastructure to do that is not, you know, they're set up for delivering it to, you know, a dispensary down the street in Colorado, basically.
Yeah.
Kurt, are you on the side of where federal legalization, the United States government is not ready to regulate? They don't have enough knowledge. They don't have enough, you know, bureaucracy set up, if you will, to handle a legal commodity like cannabis right now?
No, actually, I was going to jump back to something you said earlier. I think it's very precarious. Amazon's announcement with the House looking at the Safe Banking Act and the MORE Act being introduced. You got to remember, this is a company that makes $1 billion a day, spends billions on lobbyists, knows everything about interstate commerce, sales tax, is always looking for another 1%. So I found the announcement of the support of Amazon just as a big press release, kind of interesting. It actually, on a high note, no pun intended, in a good way, that I think there's some beef, there's something going on. It's not going to be another failed attempt with Mitch McConnell this time, because Amazon is pretty calculated in what they do and how much money they spend. And this was not done on a whim. Yes, They need to get their workers. They need more drivers. They need warehouse workers. But that they could have just done that a lot more quietly internally saying, hey, we're not going to do marijuana drug testing and move on. So there's something to this coinciding with what's going on in the House right now. So I think it is brewing.
Interesting. That's interesting. And you know, we talked to Morgan Fox of the NCIA on our news show that follows this. And, you know, the only thing he really enlightened us on is, and if you look at the new MORE Act versus the last version of the MORE Act, is for federal legalization is the ability for small business association to make loans in the cannabis sector. And obviously, that means that the banking industry will be open. So there's quite a few dominoes and amendments. And I just cannot believe that cannabis is in the middle of this whole debate, guys, in this country. It really is amazing to me that I've lived to see this at this point, and I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm not even confident one way or another. I feel a lot better about predicting what's going to happen in the NBA playoffs than I do about whether the cannabis is ever going to get decriminalized or not.
I predict the Celtics will lose. Oh, wait.
Wait, who said that? Who said that? Who said that?
I did.
Who said it? All right, go ahead.
We're going to have probably have the Olympics in Japan this summer. What I find interesting is if anyone who wins a medal actually attributes their ability to respond and work out to CBD, because WADA, which is a regulator, said that it is not a performance enhancing drug.
Right.
So there are athletes who are using it. I would like to know, and I hope somebody will speak up and say, I did everything everybody else does, blah, 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 but I also use CBD in this way and I was able to recover, work out, do better, and this is why I think I won. So there will be some left field things, and that could be one of them. And I don't know if somebody would say that, but they could, and it wouldn't be counter to the rules. So I think the world's going to influence us in ways that will whack us in the head at times we don't expect it.
Have they not started opening up CBD stores over in that part of the world recently as well, haven't they? There's kind of a newfound acceptance of this product, although I think Asia was already a massive producer of hemp already for years.
Well, if you think, what is Japan? Japan is actually the world's biggest, richest old people's home.
Yeah.
Right? It's true. It is a very wealthy old state.
And who's cannabis most helpful for?
And who could it be most helpful for? So if you think about it, if you're running the world's biggest, richest old people's home, you have to actually think about what the hell am I doing? And so I think there's a very progressive perspective increasingly driven by the geriatric need of a very large portion of society in Japan. And so I would hope the Olympics have some young, strong, active person who says that CBD helped me in this way, and that it cascades further into convincing Japanese elderly people that this may in fact be helpful to them. Because the cure for getting old is shitty. It's called being dead.
That's right.
But also every Olympics and talking about the intersection of cannabis and Olympics puts Ross Robigliotti back in the spotlight, which is great for Canadians and great for him and great for snowboarding overall, but also sort of our West Coast culture here in Canada. But he's very active, obviously, in the sector here, and everybody should check out Ross's Gold and his Instagram, because he still is talking about weed and talking about the culture and talking about the benefits.
And he's one of those guys that's core, believes in it, and actually I don't know has made any money because of it. He just loves the topic and it just keeps playing it up. And I think it's terrific he does, because it was his fame. But I'm kind of watching the Olympics purely from that perspective. And I know this is an international panel. I made a couple of things I was thinking about. One of them was, will somebody actually say, CBD helped me win?
Wow. Look, I'd love to see it. We all know that Megan Rapinoe, who plays for the U.S. women's national team, has a CBD company in Oregon with her sister. Yeah. And she loves, if anybody who's used it understands that. I do want to go back to something you said about performance enhancing, because we're now starting to get interviews with professional athletes who are out of the game, who have admitted how much they've used cannabis during their performance for us, the fans. Okay. I got to interview a guy named Eric Martin, who's in the Boston area, and he played for the Patriots, and he admitted it. Calvin Johnson, who's going to be interviewed on Pro Cannabis Media this week. Very exciting for PCM to have a new guy involved in our talent. His name is Dave Briggs, and Dave has some experience with NBC Sports and with Fox and CNN, and he's going to get an opportunity to interview Calvin Johnson this week and his business partner in a cannabis dispensary in Michigan, Rob Sims. This is the beginning. I even interviewed Trixie Garcia this week, Jerry's daughter, and she said, professional sports figured this out. They stopped testing for it now, right? That's got to be Amazon, professional sports, the Olympics, Bruce. I think all of the dots are coming together. It's almost like the perfect storm of economics, politics, and social injustice now.
Yeah, tell that to Republican governors.
Well, that's another story. And I didn't want to even mention one of those parties, Jay. You know,
Well, you can't not. I mean, in South Dakota, Mississippi, they are
Right.
trying to subvert voter, and not just a little bit voter wins, like 70% type voter wins, and taking the measures to court. And if you don't measure that, you're not in this business. Like it is, politics is your business.
And it's democracy actually that's coming under attack here. And a great article, and I read a guy in Forbes. I think it was Forbes. Don't they have a vices section? Kurt, you know all about vices, right? So he wrote a great piece about that and how it's democracy now, and cannabis is right in the middle of it, guys. This was awesome. Kurt, I want to give you a final word. Talk about cannabis.net. What's the latest? How are you guys doing?
Great. Traffic is way up based on kind of the legalization movement and people searching out for all things cannabis. And we try to get our site updated a couple times a day with what's going on. We're not afraid to give an opinion or say something that might ruffle the feathers, which is what our following likes. So check out cannabis.net when you get time. And thanks to everybody on the panel. It's always a pleasure.
And it's great to see you again. Martin, tell people how they can find your podcast.
Yeah, Martin's World over on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and over on Twitch as well. Martin's World 420 News. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I go live over on YouTube as well at 4:20 Irish time. We try to touch on news from around the world.
Who wants to tell me what time that is Eastern time? Because I get all confused about which way the clock goes. Jay, again, give yourself a plug.
Sure. Businessofcannabis.com. That's easy. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can come find us and you can see all the stuff that Bruce has done with us. The last time in Vegas before he looked like that.
That's right.
Wow.
Now I got two of you guys picking on me.
Both from Boston too. What do you know, Merlin?
Hey, Bruce. Just for the record, Bruce, I love the look. And you know what? I identify with it for the playoffs. Okay, it's very simple. It's all about the playoffs.
And I know we're wrapping up. The one thing on your football and all the sports folks, someone should be pushing the Canadian Football League, which is a parallel league to the US NFL, to be doing a live in-game trial with people with THC to see whether or not it helps with concussions. It is a big opportunity.
Oh, and I know just the doctor to talk to about that, who's involved with that BU group.
No crossing borders, nothing illegal, fully by the book. I bet when you smash helmets in Canada, it's the same as the US.
All right. I think the parallel with the NFL is something you and I will discuss offline. But that's okay. I get what you're going with that. It's kind of like the football that's played there. Kind of, okay? And I'm still an international football guy and waving the flag that Christian Pulisic played in the European Championships, Martin. See, I follow. I saw it, and Chelsea won, all that neat stuff. All right, so we are wrapping this up. I just want to say thank you to Isabel Turner, our producer, who puts this whole thing together. It's Sarah Galt, our social media's birthday today, so we want to wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And Dan French directs this whole thing still. Kurt, so you must have been fun to talk to Frenchie again, because I know you enjoy hanging out.
Not collecting unemployment? Good Lord.
So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, again, thank you so much for watching the Green Rush Live. We've got another great show next week. Again, remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Stay tuned for Weed Talk News, and we will see you live next week from our studios. Take care.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, the nation's largest retailer, Amazon, will not be testing their employees for cannabis.
Increasingly, businesses are starting to move away from punishing employees for responsible cannabis consumption.
Amazon also supports the MORE Act and the legalization movement in the U.S. at the federal level. We'll get the latest from our friends at the NCIA. On the international scene, Germany welcomes a cannabis company to their stock exchange, and we get to talk with Trixie Garcia, the daughter of the late, great Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, on We Talk News now.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. So, have you sent in your cannabis story yet to our website? We want to know what your story is, and you could win with PCM and yourstory.com. So, come out of the cannabis closet. Share what role this plant has played in your life. Now, life in general is getting more and more normal for many Americans as vaccinations surge and COVID cases come down. Another sign of normalcy is when the nation's largest retailer, Amazon, announces that they will no longer penalize employees for testing positive for cannabis. Needless to say, this was welcome news in the entire cannabis community, including the daughter of the late, great Jerry Garcia, Trixie from Holistic Industries.
Because people are drinking themselves silly every night and there's no repercussions. So thank God for those people who are working their asses off and deserve a little bit of relaxation. Has professional sports done the same thing? I know professional sports is lined up to do the same thing. I look forward to that. So yeah, it's archaic, to test for.
That entire interview with Trixie Garcia is part of my In the Weeds podcast that will be released this week. So what effect will that all have on the MORE Act? The act that's going to legalize cannabis at the federal level. It actually passed the House last year, but now a new MORE Act has been introduced, and there's actually some good provisions in there for small business. The NCIA's Morgan Fox explains.
It looks like the eligibility for Small Business Administration or loans is going to be expanded too, so that people who have been more impacted by the war on drugs will be able to access SBA resources to get into any industry, not just the cannabis industry. And aside from that, our government relations team is still doing a line-by-line analysis to determine what sort of work it might need in terms of getting to the place where we would like to see it as industry advocates and as social justice advocates.
What effect will that Amazon announcement have on the stock exchange? Well, there's only one person to check in on that. That's Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report. Here's Deborah.
I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report, and this is the business update for We Talk News. Markets were closed on Monday for the Memorial holiday, so it was a shortened trading week. Canopy Growth reported its fourth quarter revenue increased 38% to $148 million. Now, the net losses for the quarter were $617 million, which sounds like a lot, but last year their net losses were $710 million for the same time period, so a little bit less. Now, for the full year, net revenue increased 37% to $546 million. Before you get too excited, the net losses for the full year were $1.7 billion. Hollister Biosciences also reported their earnings this week. Revenue came in at $23.1 million. That was an increase of 97% over the fourth quarter. Also in the first quarter, they reported net income of $2 million, and that was better than last year's net loss of $2.2 million. And finally, Scotts Miracle-Gro increased their sales and earnings guidance for fiscal 2021. The company said it now expects company-wide sales to grow between 17% and 19%. And when it comes to Hawthorne, which is their hydroponic subsidiary of the company, they said that sales are going to grow in the range of 40 to 45%. And this is way better than the previous guidance of sales growth between 30 and 40%. And this has been your Weed Talk News Business Update.
In Massachusetts, one of the hottest markets in the cannabis industry right now, there was a disturbing report made by the Northeast Sustainable Cannabis Project to the legislature's Joint Committee on Cannabis Policy. The report focuses on indoor growing and the cost of electricity to power those facilities. The report shows that cannabis cultivation indoors in Massachusetts is responsible for 10% of all industrial electricity consumption in this state. The Cannabis Control Commission has awarded licenses to 1.1 million square feet, and that's for indoor growing, and only 285,000 for outdoor growing. This is another reason why I support the initiative of the only solar-powered dispensary in the state, Solar Therapeutics in Somerset. Seems to me incentives for energy alternatives has to be introduced. Now for the rest of the news on the Massachusetts cannabis scene, here's Ron Marshallsea. Ron?
Hello, I'm Ron Marshallsea, and I am here with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. This week, the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission announced that equity applicants can officially apply for a license type that will allow for cannabis to be warehoused, sold, and then delivered. This marijuana delivery operator license is only available to economic empowerment and social equity applicants for a minimum of 3 years. The commission said the launch of this license type is a major development to its commitment to ensuring opportunities in the industry for people who were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, as well as a part of an effort to address unregulated cannabis delivery in the state. On Friday in Taunton, Freshly Baked, a veteran-owned cannabis micro business, became the first Massachusetts cannabis business authorized to deliver products. Freshly Baked is a social equity applicant and has a delivery endorsement as a micro business. Philip Smith of Freshly Baked said, "Delivery is very special to us. We know that it's very lucrative, but for Jenny and I, a lot of this is really based on access, and delivery is the best way to bring access to folks." Finally, the multi-state cannabis operator Green Thumb Industries has acquired Liberty Compassion, a Massachusetts medical cannabis cultivator and retailer. Liberty Compassion has 2 stores in West Springfield and Boston, and with this acquisition, Green Thumb now has 2 cultivation facilities and 3 retail outlets in Massachusetts. Green Thumb CEO Ben Kovler said in a news release, "The acquisition of Liberty scales our capacity to serve massive consumer demand in one of the country's most densely populated regions." That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For We Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
In Louisiana, a bill to legalize smoking of medicinal marijuana has passed the legislature and now heads to the desk of their governor. This is a huge step forward for a program that has been limited to vaping flower by meter dose and tincture titration only. There is a companion bill still in the Louisiana House that will decriminalize possession up to 1/2 ounce. Now, no such issue in Michigan. That's where we check in with Rick Thompson. Rick?
Thank you, Jimmy. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Michigan lawmakers have introduced legislation to oppose a 5 nanogram per milliliter of blood THC threshold for drivers. But now a new study is out disputing the validity of roadside chemical testing results and methods. In the study, titled Cannabis Use in Car Crashes, the team consisted of European and American researchers. They conclude that, quote, there is no clear overall relationship with THC blood or serum levels and driving skills or crash risk. Therefore, the various THC concentrations used to define a cannabis-related driving offense may not be appropriate to evaluate driving skill impairment comprehensively, end quote. Again, the best way to measure a person's impairment is to evaluate their behavior, not their bloodstream. And the boycott of the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association and their leader Steve Linder has made another milestone achievement. Yesterday, giant multi-state cannabis product manufacturer Sherbinski's, the industry-leading DNA genetics, and the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce issued a joint statement which reads, they, in part, quote, do not support the views of Steve Linder, the MCMA, or any effort to oppress patients, caregivers, or home growers, end quote. The Sherbinski statement comes on the heels of last week's announcement that the president of the MCMA resigned and pulled his company out of the failing trade association. In a text message, Flourish last week reminded their employees that the MCMA is a trade association with 13 corporate members, but only 6 of them are willing to be named. The MCMA's website is still closed to the public, Linder has started hiding from the media, and there's been no advancement of their proposed legislation since Steve started this mess. The distancing of national companies from Linder's comments does validate the cries of foul from cannabis consumer advocates. Now, just one more quote from the DNA and Sherbinski's statement. Quote, it's important to use our voice to support all of the patients, growers, processors, hustlers, and everyone who brings out the very best in this plant and the community. There's more than enough to go around. This protectionist behavior needs to stop. End quote. And that's it for the Michigan Report. I'm Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
If you're planning on heading to Las Vegas, Nevada for MJ BizCon in October, there's a chance that social consumption lounges could become available through a very special new license. And that bill to create those 2 licensing categories, one for retailers and the other for independent lounges, well, it's now heading to the desk of their governor to be signed. Not that you need a reason to visit Las Vegas, but it certainly will make for some interesting venue parties. Now let's check out what's going on in the state of Illinois. Here's Margot Vaselli. Margot?
I'm Margot Vaselli from Margowana with this week's We Talk News Report from Illinois. The Illinois Senate just approved the new additional 110 licenses to be offered to social equity applicants from the first round. And now it's off to the governor's desk to be signed off on. There's action reports floating around in an effort to share your support to get the governor to sign off on this bill. So if you or anyone that you know lives in Illinois, please share this with them and get them to also offer their support and urging the governor to sign off on this bill. Even though Illinois smokers, unlike New York, still have no consumption lounges or public smoking allowed, we just hit another sales record at 116 million. That's the Illinois Report. I'm Margot Vaselli from We Talk News.
Our report, made by the U.S. Department of Education's National Center for Educational Statistics, looked at research that found no evidence of any increase in cannabis use in legal states by teenagers. This study looked at the cannabis habits of teens from 2009 to 2019. And this will rebut many of the prohibitionist arguments against cannabis legalization and its effect on teenagers. It also supports another study conducted over 20 years where cannabis use has actually decreased among teens in legal states. As we found out earlier in this news show, the MORE Act continues to make headlines but not headway in Washington, D.C. And with our D.C. report, here's Vote Pro podcast, Phil Adams. Phil?
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC report. Ann Milgram, President Biden's pick to head up the Drug Enforcement Administration, got a ringing endorsement this week from New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. This comes despite the strong opposition to cannabis decriminalization that Milgram expressed when she was New Jersey's Attorney General. When asked in a 2007 TV interview about her position, Milgram said, quote, "I would not support decriminalizing marijuana." Booker, who is one of 3 Senate leaders currently drafting a cannabis legalization bill, said of Milgram, quote, "She's an extraordinary American." Biden, who opposes cannabis legalization, campaigned on a platform of decriminalization, expungement, and rescheduling. So far, his administration has taken no steps toward making good on those pledges. A new bipartisan bill aimed at allowing Veterans Administration doctors to discuss medical marijuana options with their patients was introduced into the House this week. Co-sponsored by Republican Peter Major of Michigan and Democrat Connor Lamb of Pennsylvania, the Fully Informed Veteran Act would codify current VA policy into law and provide more basic protections for veteran patients who use cannabis in states where it is legal. Although Lamb was one of only 6 Democrats who voted against the Marijuana Opportunity, Reinvestment, and Expungement Act last year, this new bill represents a considerably more modest reform. Under current policy, VA doctors are allowed to discuss cannabis with their patients, and veterans who use cannabis legally are shielded from losing their VA benefits. Amazon announced this week it will begin actively lobbying Congress to end the federal prohibition against cannabis. The online retail giant also announced it will end drug testing for marijuana for many of its employees and will instead treat cannabis the same as alcohol in its drug screening program. As one of the largest employers in the U.S., Amazon's new policy could significantly reduce the number of workers whose jobs would be in jeopardy for using cannabis legally on their own time. Amazon has faced lawsuits in recent years from employees who were fired for using cannabis in accordance with state law. That's the We Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
And finally, 2 international stories for you, one out of Germany and one out of China. In Germany, the first cannabis company to go public and be listed on their stock exchange is Canna. They are an importer and exporter of medical cannabis. In Hong Kong, police made the largest bust in over a decade where they seized $7 million of flour. 3 men were arrested and may never be seen again. We'll be talking about the international cannabis scene on this week's Green Rush Live with some of the biggest names from Canada, Nathan Mison and Bruce Linton, plus a few others scattered over the 2-hour live Business of Cannabis show, The Green Rush. For now, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media for Weed Talk News. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.